The following discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in the Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
Jesus is coming out. Get into that cave.
They were like, welcome to the manger zone.
That was the only copy of potentially the recordings of how to build the pyramids. We're defending this until we die.
Welcome to the Second Rate Saints podcast. I am the producer, Joel, and to my left...
I'm Colton, and to my left...
I'm Josh. And I'm Caleb, full of opinions from an undergrad.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, is our first episode where we're covering the Gospels. So the first episode, we're just going to do a general overview. Mm-hmm. Then each one of us gets to talk about our own Gospel.
Yes.
Which is going to go...
Sweet.
Josh with Mark.
Yep.
Joel with Matthew. Colton with Luke. And then I get John.
Yes. What should people read?
Oh, yeah, before we start, go over the resources.
Yeah. So,
just as like cursory over.
Yeah, normally we do like a what have you read, but this time we're going to do what's a good read for the Gospels?
What should you read?
Yeah. What's a good thing? I actually
the
have
Bible.
Yeah, it's a good thing to start there.
That's like a place.
And then some Bibles have that little introduction that's like sometimes full of true things, and then sometimes it's just like, that's a little specific.
Yeah.
That might not be as accurate as
they give you like a whole narrative of Matthew's like child life, and you're just like, what?
Yeah, why is this here? Anyway, actually in my hand I have the textbook for the Gospels, the first year Gospels class that I took. I guess we all took. Nope. I don't know which one of us have taken it. Anyway,
yeah.
I took Gospels, but
it's
we
mandatory.
didn't have this textbook. We had the 4 Gospels and another one.
Okay. Craig L. Bloomberg's text is... Blomberg. His text is phenomenal. It's actually really good. I'd recommend it. It's a little bit of it's a technical read. It's about 400 and some odd pages. But yeah, it's a great place to actually start with Gospels. Other than that...
Wait, what did you say it was called? Jesus in the Gospels?
Jesus in the Gospels.
By who?
Craig L. Blomberg.
Awesome. Cool. Just wanted to make sure that was clear.
And you said it's a general overview of the Gospels?
Yeah.
Good. Does it harmonize them together, or is it like distinct for each of them?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it has sections that go over like the concepts and then into the specific books themselves.
What it does is that there's a introductory for general. Actually, it's laid out very similar to how this podcast little series is going to go. There's a general introduction, history, narrative, and then there's going to be like very similar to at the beginning of a commentary. There's going to be author notes, all that kind of stuff, themes, dates, all of that, and then it gets into the actual gospel itself. And it does that first of all with all the synoptics, which we're going to define here shortly, and then specifically with John, and then showing where some of those topics, themes, and events dovetail, where some of them don't. And yeah, so it goes through that. Another great work that's very similar, more of a commentary style, is just New Testament Introduction by Donald Guthrie. I haven't read the whole thing, if I'm going to be totally honest. I've only read either like somewhere in the neighborhood of like 200 pages with it. Haven't read the whole thing, but it's very good. I'd also recommend it. I haven't read the commentary section, just the more like the history, authorship, date, all that kind of stuff, cultural context and all that, which was very good. Again, another introduction.
Okay.
Another overview. I guess we'll have just 3, and then you guys can start talking about your stuff too. Craig Keener's IVP Bible background commentary. I think almost every one of us has used it.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah, you have it on your. You have the Old Testament one?
And the New Testament.
Okay. My old family's dog ate the front cover of mine.
That's a pretty good excuse there.
Damn.
Yeah. Oh, it's still useful. Still very good. Reminds me of my dog all the time.
That dog eats a lot of your stuff.
No, that's a different dog.
Oh.
No, that one's long dead.
You gotta stop bringing your stuff around dogs.
Yeah.
It's a huge put down. Oh, I'm sorry. That was a really dark one for the podcast.
That's really good. Yeah, I guess we'll my main introduction. We'll go over like my main interaction with the Gospels. There's been like a couple sermons that I've done on them, but most of my studies have been done more in like the apologetic sense, specifically in mythicism. So whether or not Jesus actually existed, whether or not can the Gospels be trustworthy as reliable historical documents, and then trying to view each individual gospel as its own theologically distinct document. That's been my interaction with the Gospels. But beyond that, that's where I'm at. There's some of them that I've read more and studied more in, and some less. But I don't know. What books would you recommend? And like, where do you come at the Gospels there, Joel?
So I know that you guys were going to kind of go over your what your first like commentary introduction was, but I think my first introduction to like the historicity of Jesus or something like that was my youth group did a Bible study around Case for Christ when that was like a huge thing, right? And I think that was really influential when it comes to how you think about the historicity of Jesus or the gospel accounts in general, right? Because what he did was try to bring forth very layman's terms exactly what you said the forensics of it was, what the specific ordeal that Christ went through, right? So I'd say that was one of the first works that I actually studied.
Sure.
Right? Now, I might have been like 16 or 17, so I don't know how much of it I actually remember, but I know that it was introduced to me and that was like the first, we'll say gospel account commentary that I read. Is that a good representation of Case for Christ? I mean, it's more
Honestly,
apologetics, to be honest with you.
Read it so long ago.
Oh, yeah.
I've never read it.
It's okay.
Same here.
I enjoyed it.
I've actually read it a couple times. So
It's okay.
I thought for sure that was a craze that reached out here as well, but maybe.
It was.
Did?
I was.
Okay.
I think I was too young to read it.
Also,
I also didn't care.
you know what's a better Case for Christ?
What's that?
Mere Christianity.
That's a good book.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like a lot of crossover there, and obviously
Obligatory
Christianity's-
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to.
There we go.
I did see the author's name is Lee Strobel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did watch him get into a debate with Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens.
Really?
That's he's out of his depth with that.
Yes, but Hitchens didn't debate him on the topic.
Hitchens does that all the time.
Yeah,
The only time that he
And
actually debated anyone on the topic was with William Lane Craig in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
One debate.
Is that because Craig kept pulling him back onto the topic?
Yeah.
Craig
Yeah, that
is
makes sense.
brutal.
Yeah.
Like the way he debates.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because like one of the things Craig said, he was just like, nobody else prepares like I do.
That's funny, actually. Yeah.
He was like, I prepare like a lawyer. Like,
Well, which is
Yeah.
great, but yeah, no, I think actually both of us kind of share a little bit of that apologetics origins. Is there any specific book that like during school that you read about the Gospels or any commentary? Seriously.
I read a really good commentary on Mark. I'm trying to remember what it was called. I
Yeah,
think it was just called.
It's just called
Gospel
by
Commentary.
Roger Strongstad.
Yeah, Roger
Mark
Strongstad,
a commentary.
Yeah.
I think it's just called.
It's a standalone, not in a series, right?
No, not a series at all. It's a very short read. I think it's 120 pages or something.
Yeah, it's short.
But I read it and it was pretty influential in the way that I thought about the authorship and dating.
Okay.
Because obviously Mark and priority is a huge thing, and we'll get into that when we do Mark. Who has Mark again? Is it? It's Josh. Has Mark. Yeah.
Josh.
Yeah, so you'll start to become familiar with these terms. I'm sure we'll do some definition stuff as we come across them. But yeah, cool. Colton, how about yourself? Is there anything?
As for commentaries on the gospel specifically, growing up, I didn't actually read that many commentaries. The vast majority of my interaction with Christian theologians or anything like that was through devotionals and different types of like readings on it, that kind of stuff. Also the Shack, but doesn't really count.
For real?
I'm not joking.
Okay.
Although the Shack's obviously not a commentary, but
Obviously. It's a commentary on the author.
that is it. Yes, that is true.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'll
Aren't
save it
all
for
books,
next week.
though? That's
Whoa.
a stupid thing to say.
No,
I'm sorry.
no, that's
Introspection.
no, that's probably more intelligent than we have time to get into.
Fair enough, dude.
No, I read a lot of different devotionals when I was younger. I never finished any of them.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, no, I was that kid, but I think a lot of the formation around how I learned about the Gospels was either through that or through my pastor or through my parents or so on and so forth. It wasn't really until school that I started actually reading certain commentaries or going over different commentaries. Then Mark was the one that I probably started with the Gospels, the one that you were talking about, as well as the one I did for Luke, which I don't remember the name of off the top of my head, but honestly,
Is it not Charismatic Theology of St. Luke?
no, but that was one of them.
Okay.
Charismatic Theology of St. Luke was one of them.
By the same
was Strong's
Yeah,
author.
Roger
That's
Strong's.
Strongstead.
Okay, yeah.
That book's phenomenal, but
It's pretty good.
Yeah. Sorry, I know you had read that, and it was just
Yeah. For John, I think I've read more devotionals on John than I have commentaries, although I've read a couple of commentaries for classes and stuff.
Yeah.
Honestly, to learn about theology, devotionals might not be the way to go, but they are a good place to start if you don't know anything about it.
Oh, I forgot about the NIV application commentary. Those things are amazing.
Okay.
Like, honestly, for preaching, excellent.
Yeah.
Such good, well, again, application.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So if you're going to read commentaries on the Gospels, NIV application, shout out. You're not a fan, are you? Sorry.
No, I have absolutely no opinion.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
I like using the application ones to because I'm not a very applicable thinker.
Right.
Okay.
Not an abstract.
You're an abstract thought, Josh.
I am an abstract thought. No, I'm a theory, not a practical thinker. So when
I'm not a man. I'm an idea.
we live in a society, that was clothesline.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it my turn?
It is your turn.
Okay. Yeah, no, so this is gonna be super embarrassing. Most of my early look or overview of the Gospels was actually all the Jesus movies that were out.
Nice.
VeggieTales.
No, the one where you see the actor that kind of looks like Obi-Wan Kenobi from the second movie.
Were you
But
talking
Star
about
Wars? And where he just walks through town with a white robe, and he has the Bee Gees haircut, and
I
he
have no idea what we're talking about.
There's so many good 90s Bible movies.
Oh yeah, just go to any church's library.
You need a VHS player, though.
Yes,
For sure, I probably
Or to
watched
watch
a
The
few of
Chosen.
these. Yeah.
Doesn't William Dafoe play?
Yeah.
yeah, but that was in a very controversial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Actually, what's his name? Ewan McGregor does play Jesus in a movie specifically about the 40 days in the desert being tempted.
Oh.
Yes,
Yes. So
Yeah.
Obi-Wan is Jesus.
Yeah, so my dad liked them, and every once in a while, he would just put one on while I was at his house or whatever, and it would be the Gospel of John or Jesus, whatever, and it was just everything he said. But it also in high school, I was determined to read the whole Bible through, and so before high school finished, I had read the Bible through twice.
That's better than Move.
That's good.
I just it had become the thing around grade 10 that I was the Bible kid.
You're the walking Bible, man.
Yeah, that everybody was wow, that guy knows a lot about the Bible, and I was well, I gotta back this up. So
Yeah.
Can't let anyone. Dude, that's how I feel getting a degree.
Yeah. Someone's you know about a lot about this, right? And you're I guess I have to now.
I suck so much money and I have
validation.
Yeah.
So no, I wanted to because I was that was how I was gonna get to know God, and I wasn't satisfied with Bible studies, cursory Bible studies. They're great. Everybody needs to go to one. Everybody should be involved. But as an individual, I was obsessive. So I was going to every youth conference I could. I was going on every mission trip with my youth. I was going to every youth event. I was going to church as much as I could, even when my parents didn't want to go. I would get my grandma to pick me up so I could go. And I wanted to read the Bible through, so I read it through once, and then I read it through the chronological order. But when I wasn't doing that, I would just fall back to the Gospels, because I would just be where do I want to start? I'm not going to start in Ruth. I'm going to go back to Jesus. And one thing I've noticed is Gideon's has started, they hand out the New Testament, sometimes, but they also will hand out just the Gospels. Because for new Christians, they'll often say start at John. Because the way it's written is you don't he kind of makes a good argument for Christ without having to have read the whole Old Testament.
Yeah.
More so than Matthew.
Yeah, well, Matthew, you kind of have to know the messianic backgrounds, which Joel will get into.
But yeah, so I just became obsessed with it, and then watching those movies, and then
Okay.
it just became the fallback.
Is there any specific gospel-related work that
Here's the thing: beyond Cost of Discipleship, I haven't read that many books that focus on the Gospels.
Okay.
For sermons, I always go back to the Gospels and I read the commentaries about them. But yeah, the IVP Bible background stuff is great. I love that. I love piecing apart the stories and the references that Jesus makes. But one of the things I found was that the Gospels for me was I love the Old Testament, but the New Testament is where salvation is found, and so it had the power of the Old Testament, but the urgency of the New Testament, and so
Okay.
That's good.
it's the draw.
Yeah. So we're going to be going into kind of what is a gospel, right? Because this is the overview. You want to know right from the beginning. So it actually comes from obviously the Greek word euangelion. I guess it's not obviously, is it? In my mind, I'm talking to other people who have taken the same level of Greek that I have, which is not very much. But it's the good news. When you hear someone say the good news, that's what we're talking about. And you'll hear that in Christianese a lot of the time, right? And kind of what it is it would be the same word used for the good news of just winning a battle, just getting over something, right?
You're saying Chris is victor?
Shut up. This guy wants to put Chris is victor in everything, which I get, I understand.
It's like us and C.S. Lewis.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is... The term is using the metaphor of returning from war victorious, right?
I'll stop.
It is the good news. It's what you want to hear. They would come into the town yelling it, right? And that's kind of the approach we want to take, is that we are yelling the good news that Christ has come. And this is the format that we're doing it in, is a podcast where we explain to you what the good news is in a really weird, abstract way.
Yeah, by yelling it. So turn down your headphones right now.
Yeah, for sure. Another word we're going to come across is synoptic. So the synoptic gospels, which is Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the reason they would be called that is because they have some of the main sources are similar. Although there's lots of different things behind what a synoptic gospel is supposed to be. Sorry, what was that?
I was going to cut you off. Go.
Okay, cool.
Well, I think we should clarify.
I believe Joel was speaking.
Oh my goodness, guys.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. Am I only supposed to cut you off?
Yeah.
I think I need to talk now. So we all cut him off.
Well, I think if I'm allowed,
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
man,
We're falling apart.
there's a reason why the Gospels, when you said salvation is found in the New Testament, why we go back to the Gospels all the time, why Gideon's is only putting the Gospels in, the first new believers Bibles that they hand out.
Yeah.
It's because, at least, and this is how I've phrased it in the past, it's because this is the story of how Jesus changed the world. Mm-hmm. This is how salvation occurred in time. This is the story. And so the gospel, the good news, was preached. And there's actually a little bit of tension in the good news being preached before Jesus' ministry is complete. But we can get into that when that actually occurs in some of our gospels that we'll be talking about in the next few weeks. But regardless, when the New Testament, before the majority of the New Testament is being penned, they're still talking about the good news. Mm-hmm. They're still preaching. People are still being converted. People are still experiencing the resurrected Christ. Mm-hmm. And so as the New Testament is being written, specifically the epistles, which were mostly written before the Gospels were written, there's this, we have these epistles which are reflections on, hey, this is what the victory of Christ, or, all Christ's ministry, the good news, this is the extension of the good news. This is how it reflects in practice. This is what it affects eschatologically. This is what it affects in your personal life, in your financial life, but it's all reflections of that good news, and which had been preached. But now things are getting later, and the eyewitnesses are dying off, and so they write down the stories of how Jesus changed the world, and that's what the Gospels are. this massive event has happened in this person of Jesus, which all the other epistles talk about, hey, this is how that's lived out. But the Gospels are the recordings of that actual event.
Yeah. And the Old Testament, though it comes before, is about God leading humanity and creation to that point.
Yes. Yeah.
Building up to that. Kind of like the rising action in a novel towards the climax.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
The final battle, if you will. But it's
Yes.
not, because we still got Revelation to go.
already, but not yet.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's totally where we're going.
And it's synoptic because, like, the reason the word synoptic is because, like, they're synchronous.
yeah.
The three Gospels.
yeah. Well, that's you could say that, but I
Yeah.
would just say that it has a common source, and that's going to
Yes.
be
Yeah.
Do one of you guys, because you're going to be going, actually, Colton, Joel, and Josh are all going to be talking about synoptic stuff.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to just do a quick overview of what is the synoptic? Which order are they hypothesized in being written? What is a Q document? Is there a Q document? Was it Aramaic?
You're really putting a lot of
That's a lot, yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so
Which is the first gospel written, Josh?
Matthew, Proto Matthew, which is Q. So
Joel's on my side.
there's two, not two ideas, but there's two main ideas in the authorship, right? Which is one called Markan priority, and one would be Q. And Q is just there's a German word for source that was used for.
Kel.
Do you know what the whole word is? Because I don't remember.
I think it's Kel, but I don't actually know how to pronounce
It could be, but it just means source, right? And there are some texts that are similar between all three of the synoptic gospels that don't seem to originate in any of them,
Right.
depending on what order you believe they were written. So the idea is that Q is either a collection of documents or a proto-Matthew, an early version of Matthew that hadn't been fully fleshed out yet. And then the other idea is that the Markan priority is basically Peter's going around and preaching,
Right.
and Mark is following him along and writing down what he says, and this is almost like a bit of a preamble, right? This is the official version of Peter's message, right? Which is
Yeah.
up in the air. Again, a lot of this is theoretical, and this is when they say synoptic, they just mean there's commonalities between them, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, with the synoptics, the three, Mark, Matthew, and Luke. I said Matthew and Mark backwards. It doesn't matter. But what makes John different from the synoptic gospels? Caleb.
The synoptic gobbles.
Gobbles.
That's
the synoptic
fair.
gobbles.
That's fair. 'Cause that seems to be the tone of what's going on right now.
Confusion.
Well, it seems like though they're similar in material, each of the Gospels have a different purpose behind them,
Yeah.
like or an audience, so to speak. But that depends. Again, there are traditions behind the scholarship.
Yeah.
There are paths that people fall behind. But there's also a lot of like questions around who wrote it, when it was written,
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Well, it's not just like there's some source material that's the same. Some of the same verbiage, like
Yes.
quotations,
yeah.
and giant chunks. But then some of them are quotations, but obviously cut down or reframed to match their own
Or
right.
themes.
or there's
so-
stories that there's like 3 versions of with slightly different
Emphasis.
information.
Yeah.
But it's also when you study them, some of those stories are actually different stories happening at different time periods. The thematic pattern is just the same. So people will sometimes get confused thinking that they're the same story, but with emphasis differences.
Yep.
But they're actually, one happened 3 days before Jesus died, and the other one happened
Well, it's
2 days into his
it's
ministry.
tricky when both of those happen.
Yeah.
Because there are some things that are retold with a different emphasis.
Yeah.
And then there are some things that happen multiple times.
Yeah.
And it's tricky. And if you're not following along in a commentary where somebody's,
Yeah.
gone through each you know, hey, fits this theme and this happens in a slightly different way and therefore blah, blah, blah. Where if you're just doing a cursory reading, it could be excusable why you just go, oh, it's the same story. But there's and this is just a quick little thing, but so there's what Joel had called the Q document, maybe Proto-Aramaic Matthew, who knows. There's a common narrative between Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where Mark is 76% roughly. This is just whatever stats from the internet, but you get the idea. And all of these are debated because it's is that the exact same verbiage? Is it not? 76% of that tradition is found in Mark, 46 is found in Matthew, and 41 is found in Luke. And then there's hey, this is unique to Luke. This is unique to Matthew. This is connected by Luke and Matthew, but not in Mark. And you have all weird stuff. Right. John doesn't have any of that.
Yeah.
At all.
Okay, do you know what the one miracle is across all the Gospels?
Oh, it's the feeding of the 5,000.
Absolutely. That's my favorite thing. Because it does show that there is a huge difference. Because really, there's only two miracles, which is the resurrection and the feeding of the 5,000, that are actually common between all the Gospels.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why when you see
compiled
movies of Jesus,
with Mark, the crucifixion is there, but the body's gone and then it ends.
Yeah.
That's actually true.
It doesn't have the resurrection proper.
It
says the women went away afraid.
Yes.
With the tomb that's empty.
It never.
Yes.
It implies resurrection.
But it didn't. For an audience of that time, yes, they would have been taught the resurrection, but it's also yes. But there's a bit of it. The mystery is important.
Yeah, I mean
Marks.
they do meet the angel that's hey, he's risen.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
but yeah,
they don't. They don't record it.
Good catch, actually. I wasn't even going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But and then you also have there's two passages that are coming to mind of add-ons.
Yeah,
Later
which you will get into when or Josh will get into when he's covering.
There is an additional ending to Mark.
Yep.
Arguably two.
Yep.
Yes. And there is the
John 8.
Yes,
Yep.
John 8, the woman
caught in adultery.
woman caught in adultery.
Yeah, and then there's much smaller add-ons as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when we say add-ons, we mean
To,
it looks
the
like
Lord's Prayer.
within 100 to 500 years after the gospel was written, a scholar or monk or whatever believer who was recording a transcript of the gospel may have heard or had read another document that had said Jesus had also done this.
Yeah.
In this point, and
they
thought it was
Part of the
part of it.
A lot of the smaller add-on, quote-unquote add-ons, additions are thought to be where they would have a transcript and people would make inline comments for clarification's sake or for things.
Yeah,
but then when they're actually copying the thing again, they will add that to the actual document because they have scribes don't have the same mindset that we do have today. Same with biographers.
Yeah.
There's a reason. Does one of you guys want to get into why is there historical, quote unquote, inaccuracies in the gospel accounts? Different events happen in different orders.
Well, before we get to that, there's the reason why they're writing in the notes, not just from pattern of you get it. It's because paper was super expensive, so it's not like you can have a notebook next to your copy of the gospel, which you didn't have because the church had the copy of it.
Yep.
And so you can't just take your notebook from home and start writing notes on the side.
Also,
you have to write it.
People still do that today. People still write in line.
Yeah. Well, in the early church, there would actually normally one church community would have one copy of one of the letters or one of the gospels, and it'd be passed around from family to family, and then sometimes given on to the next church or just circulate in that family. And you're responsible for safeguarding it too, because that's how valuable they were.
Yeah, and it's because they believed it was the word of God, whatever, but also
whatever.
Paper cost so much money at that time. What did they figure? The reason why a lot of the books of the New Testament are the same size is because that was the standard sheet of paper you could buy, a scroll you could buy for a year's wage.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, there's a reason why when Constantine, I think he only orders because the construction of 300 Bibles, complete
Yeah.
it might have been just been New Testament, but
Codexes.
Yeah. I think they were just scrolls at that point. I think it was
Okay.
you just. But anyway, 300 copies, and some people commented it's like only 300 to go across the entire Mediterranean. The wealth required to do that is insane. And so when Constantine did that, even though what we might read it today is like, dude, we could print off 300 Bibles and like. Pff.
Yeah, we have a printing press.
Well, that's how people play down like the burning of the Library of Alexandria. It's like they're like, "Hey, this is not such a big deal. It's just books." But it's like, no, those are the only books we have.
Yeah.
That was the only copy of potentially the recordings of how to build the pyramids, because they were like, because it took the wealth that produced the pyramids could only produce one scroll.
Yeah.
Like
crazy.
Like to think about that.
Also, Library of Alexandria got destroyed like 3 times.
Yeah.
But
But also the time
Oh
it got
yeah, I forgot there
destroyed.
was a thing for you.
The even sadder thing
I disagree.
about the burning of Alexandria was, as a wedding gift, Mark Antony bought Cleopatra the second biggest library and moved it into the Library of Alexandria, and then it burnt down. So,
yeah.
Shoot.
Cleopatra
Have you guys ever
burned
run
down.
into issues with the missing verses
with like the end of Mark?
in the king? No,
talking
not
about
just
the
the end of
Zondervan?
Mark.
Yeah,
Something like that. Like if it's basically anything other than the 1612 KJV,
Oh,
then
yeah.
people
Yeah.
are like, oh, they took verses out.
Some
He
of my
goes, "No."
family members are that way.
Yeah.
I mean, no,
No,
it's not
it's
really
not
fair
fair.
enough
It's
because
not.
it's historically inaccurate, and this is kind of why we bring up this topic, right?
Yeah.
It's because you're going to have people walk up to you. I had somebody, they had an NLT that they were giving out to a new believer, and what they said to him was like, "Now be careful because they've changed some things in there, but once you can get a KJV, you'll be fine."
If
I'm like, well, then why give him the NLT in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And I think if I was going to suggest to a new Christian a translation, it would be New Living Translation. I think it's really good. It cuts out some of the more complicated
verbiage.
Not-
poetic stuff.
Not passages, but
Not the
Yeah, it
passages.
doesn't just
basically.
snip them out.
No, it
No.
smooths out the more complex grammar.
yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a what's called a thought for thought translation.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I have only ever come across one error in the entire
proper error?
reading of it.
Yeah, okay.
And it's very small, and by context, you wouldn't even get it. But if you took that verse out of context, it would technically say something that's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But have you ever come across those like people who get really
Yeah.
upset over it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if they're cutting out parts of the Bible,
Well, here's the thing.
No, I'm joking.
It's the same people that say, if it was good enough for the disciples, it's good enough for me. It's like, come on.
Yeah, so you have the synoptics. They're interesting. What do we do about John? The synoptic
Yeah.
people talked about synoptics.
Yeah, come
You're a
on, John,
person.
man.
Okay, John, written arguably, depending when the synoptics finally got written, John is the latest dated. All the other gospels are theorized to have circulated around. That John actually is, and I guess we'll get into this when I cover cover John
Yeah.
more in depth. John is arguably written by a collection of his disciples, and it's a more dramatized. You're going to see, we're going to get into it, but it has a lot more reorganization of historical events than the synoptics.
Yeah.
It's particularly more than Luke. And it covers themes way more. Historically, it had been thought to have heavy Greek influence, and that is still true-ish today. But although the format of the presented material might be Greek, the themes are actually super Jewish. And again, we'll get into that.
Super Jew.
Super Jewish, just like Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Super Jewish gospel for a super Jew.
Yeah. Well, it's actually a
I don't think we
perfect.
can go around saying super Jew.
Why not?
Was he Jewish? Yes.
Is he the most?
Is he super? Yeah.
It's pretty super duper.
Joel's dying.
Yeah.
No, I think John is a great example of the merger between Greek culture and Jewish.
Just like John chapter 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think John shows a deliberate break off from the synoptics.
Oh. Yeah.
I think it's it brings let's say, the most developed Christological theology out of all the Gospels. It shows that it is an older theological work. I think so. I think that it presents the theology of a slight, and I only mean slightly because the difference is like 20 years, 20 or 30 years, a slightly older early church.
Okay. Though Matthew does quote the Old Testament explicitly more.
Oh,
yeah. Matthew is considered like the Jewish gospel. So what he's doing, like, if John is for the Gentiles or for the Greek, if it's bridging the Jewish and Greek thought, which is what some people think. I know maybe that's not your position, but it has been thought of as the Greek gospel. Then Matthew is the one for the Jews.
The reason why, at least my understanding of Matthew, is because of his heavy reliance on this is the Messianic king, this is the Messianic prophecy, which is really only valuable for Jews, because if a Gentile goes, oh, you're prophesied, Savior king, okay.
Well, not just that. It's like the Old Testament books. It's the longest. It has a genealogy. It quotes itself like the Old Testament.
Yep. Thus saith the Lord almost.
127 times.
Yep.
Explicitly. Like it's not hiding it.
Yeah.
And
it also says as it was written or foretold, as prophesied.
Yeah.
So that this prophecy would be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Right.
You can tell. I can imagine Jesus with the disciples and John's thinking, just making references, but abstractly, saying things Jesus says, but hidden in metaphor and stuff like that. And then Matthew is has a book in front of him and it's just everything Jesus says, and he's just constantly writing.
Well, that's actually the argument for
references
Q.
to Old Testament.
That's actually the argument for Q. Is an Aramaic proto-gospel of just Jesus' teachings and sayings.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we have patristic evidence, of the early church father evidence of, hey, Matthew wrote first in Aramaic, and then everybody now is like, what? Where? When?
Yeah.
Wasn't some of the ideas based off of loanwords? No. I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of Daniel.
Well,
Shoot.
Yeah. But then
that's awesome.
Yeah. But here's the thing. There's also, and there's precedent for this in other biblical books, where there's this older book that died out, and then there's the one we have.
Yeah.
Chronicles and Kings both quote the kings of the book of the kings of Israel, the book of the Chronicles of Israel. And these are the books of Kings and Chronicles, and they're not those books that they're referencing.
Yeah.
Those books are long gone, lost to history.
Well, because Chronicles would have been written post-exile.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy.
But even the book of Kings quotes those two books every once in a while.
Yeah.
But
The Book of the Kings, stuff like that.
But the books of the kings of Israel and the books of the kings of Judah.
Yeah.
But those two books are gone.
Yeah.
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 Well, we're talking about books that aren't scripture.
Uh-oh.
Are we gonna
We're going to
skip it to our last topic?
What's the topic in between?
We've done everything. We have false gospels now.
Oh, so we're not skipping drill. This is the next one. Oh, okay. Yeah. There's some that have argued that there's, there's hundreds. There's actually maybe.
You don't need to argue
50.
it. It's true.
No, there's hundreds.
There's maybe 50.
We're defending this until we die.
Yeah, I have to be the contrarian here, so
Yeah.
don't agree with me.
No. I'm gonna agree with you this time.
We're having the argument backwards again, guys.
A little bit, yeah.
You're right.
How many copies of Twilight are there? You know
Oh,
what I'm
no.
saying? That story becomes popular, and then everyone tries to put their own spin on it.
What?
Anyway, this is the introduction into false gospels.
I was going to say, there's about 50, maybe a little more, of alternative gospels about Jesus. Some are children, like hey, this is like Jesus as a kid, because we never wrote it. There's nothing about him being a kid.
Yeah.
Others are like an actual narrative story, like the gospels that we have. Others are just his teachings, more in a
Some are pseudo
Plato, Aristotle type document,
Yeah.
And anywhere in between. Most of which we do not have complete forms of.
Yeah.
Why aren't these in the gospel?
Would you be able
Completed
to
in the
name a
canon?
couple?
Because basically they're what we would call them today fan fiction.
That's what I was going for.
Yeah.
No,
bad
he just,
example.
he just
I
really likes
understand.
Twilight.
I love Twilight.
Well, yeah, you have your Gospel of Thomas, you have your Gospel of Peter, Gospel of Mary, Gospel of
Jesus.
Jesus. Actually, yes. There's even a Gospel of Judas where he's just like, "Hey, you're going to betray me,"
Yep.
and it's just like, "Okay."
Oh, it's Jesus saying, "Okay, I want you to betray me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of these we
Well-
don't have complete forms of. I think Judas, Thomas,
Peter.
and do we have a complete Peter?
I don't know if we have a complete
We have a Thomas
one.
because of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Really?
I didn't know
Yeah.
that was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
It was
I
one of the
didn't either.
pseudepigraphal books found with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
I'm going to have to rethink my entire thing about the Dead Sea Scrolls because to my brain that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay. Apparently I need to read more about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
I could be wrong.
I'm
but-
pretty sure we have a
yeah.
at least nearly complete Peter.
Okay.
No, but the reason
Not
is
the
because
book
there's
of
also
Peter. Gospel of Peter.
Yeah.
pseudepigraphal books from the Old Testament that are also in.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
that one, but as far as I was aware, the
Yes, you're right.
the
What am I talking about?
Dead Sea Scrolls were
Only
sealed and
Old
then not added onto.
Yeah. You're absolutely
Like there's
correct.
no new documents
You're
from
absolutely
before Christ.
correct. I take that all back. Thank
Okay.
you for the correction.
What's your favorite apocrypha though?
Apocrypha
is-
is pseudepigrapha. Because
Okay, so all
We should
apocrypha
probably-
is pseudepigrapha, but not all pseudepigrapha.
I think it's the other way
is it
around.
apocrypha. Is that
Apocrypha is like a
Maccabees.
it's not canon, but
Yes.
there's like a list of
Second
books.
canon.
There's like 14 of them.
These false gospels would be pseudepigrapha, but
Yeah.
why are they considered false?
Because they're bad.
Wow.
Okay, there's some ridiculous stuff that
Insightful.
happens in them, though, right? Like, like he makes Mary Magdalene a man so she can go to heaven.
Yeah.
It's like a weird. Well,
Isn't-
and that's kind of where they would date them to later, is because hey, that wasn't a belief of the early church.
Well, it doesn't
Yeah.
sorry.
This is
I'll
something that
finish.
crept in from heresies that were common of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of them date to the 2nd or 3rd century.
Right.
Yes.
Most of them show massive amounts of Gnostic thought. Also, most of them will be altered depending on location and date. That their documents, particularly ones where it's just, hey, it says, the gospel or the sayings of Jesus. It's not a narrative form when it's just his sayings, more like a philosophical
Right.
argument. There's a lot of variation in those, and they'll show that those change based off of those are edited based off
Yeah.
of their geographic location and what kind of competing philosophies were there at the time in the location where we found this
Yeah.
document.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, again, because I can be wrong. They're also less common than what would be considered the 4 main gospels.
Yeah, they weren't spread by the church.
And the reason being
Not normal.
the spreading of the church, but also like in the same way, when you have like a common concept in movies, there'll be like Dracula, and there'll be like the Dracula movie, but then there'll be a bunch of other Dracula movies.
There'll be
that are made-
Morbius, yeah.
Yeah, like there's Bram
Dracula
Stoker's, and
Untold.
everybody knows Bram Stoker's Dracula, blah, blah, blah. And then there's all the others. But
Right.
there's Dracula above and beyond all of them, and like all the others are like there.
Sure, there's
Like-
Lord of the Rings, and then there's every other fantasy novel ever made.
Yeah.
And Lord of the Rings
Wow.
is at the top.
I mean, I agree, but that's
Well,
a top,
he is
that's
the
top.
grandfather of modern fantasy.
That's
the idea
true.
of kings, elves,
Yeah.
the whole like.
Kings were
He ripped
invented
off the
by
entire
him,
thing
yeah.
from a play opera, yeah.
No, but you get what I mean.
Yes.
The idea of that world type building
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
very Tolkien.
Inspired
yeah.
almost all of modern
yeah.
fantasy.
All
Yeah.
tabletop fantasies take the elements of
Asimov.
dwarves and elves from him.
Yeah.
And halflings.
In
Like
that
Asimov.
specific way, I mean
Yeah.
that he is at the top and everything else
Yeah.
copies off
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
Like Asimov with sci-fi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Hitchcock with
birds.
Horror.
birds horror. Yeah.
Thriller / horror. Yeah. Yeah.
That's enough metaphors.
Well,
Next thing.
with the pseudepigraphal gospels, these proper false gospels, they are buck wild to read. But isn't the two main arguments as to why they're not part of the Bible is one that they weren't written by witnesses of Christ,
Yeah.
or at least trusted witnesses
is
of Christ.
which is kind of an argument, except
And-
and I mentioned this to Joel.
Okay.
one of my weird hot takes is it's weird that we say Gospels were written by eyewitnesses when probably half of them weren't.
Okay.
John is a compilation work,
Sure.
I think. And we'll get into that.
Yeah,
I was gonna say,
traditionally
yeah, you
written
did bring
by
it up
John
before,
himself.
You did provide the only authorship as his disciples, which is not the
I was
most
going
common
to
one.
say that.
No,
too.
no, but we'll get there. If,
Okay,
if,
cool,
if
cool.
people want to beat me over the head with that, fair enough. But let me defend
I'm not
myself.
gonna
Just
beat
for the
you over the
listener's
head.
sake, the traditional answer, though this is a rising competitor to that
Yep.
that tradition, is that John, the same guy that wrote First, Second, and Third John, and was given the Revelation,
Yep.
wrote all 5 books.
Yeah.
However, there is competition to that.
Yeah, even in the early church fathers' time, there was competition about that. But anyway,
Yeah, but the early church fathers also had other weird beliefs.
What we're trying to say is Caleb is a liberal theologian.
anyway,
You don't think Paul's real, do you?
and then and then
wasn't real. What are you
Mark
talking
was not
about?
written by an eyewitness.
It was written by a woman.
That's you can't call me liberal.
That's
liberal
Hebrews.
theologian.
Come on, that's Hebrews.
That one at least could be feasible.
The only reason for that is just because it doesn't have a name attached to it.
Yeah. Hebrews. not
If
Mark.
someone wants to ever talk to me about Hebrews authorship, send a
And
message to
Just
Second
for the
Saints.
just to clear up confusion, we do believe the Bible is the Word of God, inspired by the Spirit,
Yeah.
and we will
And
get
it's
into
completed
inspiration
too,
and
right?
inerrancy at another podcast.
I'm super excited for that one.
And it's
Yes.
completed, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the
Okay,
canon is closed.
Okay,
Canon
thank
is
you.
closed. There are no more apostles.
As
There's
depending
no
whether or not
Joseph Smith room
authorship was the main one, right?
authorship, and then also contradictions in theology, right?
Yes.
Like false gospel
Yeah.
idea like that's talked about by Peter or Paul.
Yeah, that's those are the two main ones. And here's the thing: if someone actually, and I don't understand why this isn't a main argument brought out against this like false gospel stuff.
Right.
If you were to sit down and read the 4 gospels, and then you were to sit down and read all the pseudepigrapha, which ones could be unified? Which ones actually are documents that could be talking about, hey, these guys are talking about the same thing. That guy is over there doing whatever. If you were to take it to a court case and go, hey, which one of these eyewitnesses actually saw anything? And you had 4 people that are talking roughly about the same thing, and even their theological points, although emphasis is different, are the same. And then there's another one where it's just like, hey, you know the Gospel of Judas? Hey, yeah, no. Jesus is a created being, and human beings are just a series of, after a bunch of other gods have created beings, and then there's human beings way down at the bottom.
Yeah. Gnosticism.
Yeah. I wonder...
Jesus
I wonder,
beat up some guys with a bird he made out of clay.
which one's that?
What?
You don't know about that one?
No, which one's
so
that?
so they were getting into like
Which one is this?
I don't remember which one. I think it's
Thomas?
I think it's Thomas.
I haven't read
But
that.
it's so Jesus as a little kid is sitting by the river.
Oh, it's one of the child ones. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of the child ones, and it's like a copy of like how like Jesus challenged the Pharisees all the time and like showed them.
Yeah.
But it was a little too on the nose because it's just like these Pharisees are like, it's the Sabbath and you're playing with the mud, you're plowing, you're breaking the law, right? It's to a kid, like who cares?
That wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
No.
Never mind the historical inaccuracy, and the Jordan River is nowhere near where he's playing at this moment. But
So it's written by someone nowhere near.
yeah, and the Pharisees come by, and then he's like, out of the mud he was playing with, shapes into his bird, and then like snaps, makes it real, and they fly and attack the Pharisees off.
Oh, so you're saying Alfred Hitchcock from the brief 5 minutes ago got his inspiration from Jesus?
Yeah, and then Jesus says a snappy line like he does in the rest of the books, and they're trying to mix the like Jesus back talks to his parents, which is not what he does at the temple.
Yeah.
He actually he makes like a really deep point about fathership to Joseph, and his mother, and they try to make it this like he talks back to authority figures, and and they're also establishing him as a creative being.
Well,
yeah,
I think anyone who is going to study the early church as a history,
yeah,
it's a confusing time, particularly when, fully honest here, Christians sometimes did go crazy and actually attack and have killed heretics.
You mean we've got it together now?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think the church has ever got it together, but that's part of the
Right.
thing of why we
Yeah.
continually need Jesus.
Yes.
But but also that happened in the inverse. But you have splinter groups that break off from your church,
Yeah.
that believe something different. That's why they broke off. They're going to create, or they're going to obtain somehow
Yeah.
their own scripture literature and claim to be
Yeah.
Christians. Should be a thing. If anyone is a historian worth his salt, will go, oh, we should expect to find alternative texts
Yeah.
that will say other things
Yes.
to contradict what mainline whatever this religious organization is.
Now-
Not even talking about the validity of those claims of the religion. That's just a thing that, those are splinter groups that are not representative of the original thing.
Yeah. Well, that's one theory. The other theory is the Council of Nicaea was a politically motivated thing to exclude the truth. You know,
the truth.
Yeah, when they got all the four gospels, they said the other ones are too controversial, but they're
beyond
true.
the fact that they didn't even talk about the canonization of the Gospels at the Council of Nicaea, and it was all about the Arian heresy. Yeah, sure. Why not? Why not?
Am I
Let's go with
thinking
that.
about the
Yeah,
wrong
everyone
Chalcedon?
else says that.
Whatever, Chalcedon. I don't
Even
remember.
then, no.
I know. I've heard people.
Okay,
I've
so let's
heard people
explain
on
the
that-
Council of Nicaea to
Okay,
people who don't know what we're talking
Before
about.
I
Like
do,
me.
when the Bible was, that's the wrong word. Founded. When they created the Bible, they canonized it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not created, organized.
Organized. You're right.
Which the official canonization of the Bible didn't occur till like what? Actually, 700. It was
It
late.
depends. Yeah.
No. Like that's a thing.
Yeah. It was organized around 300-ish, and then finally
Not
cemented
even.
around.
That's
that
why
time.
there's massive discrepancies between you have a church in Iberia, Spain, and the church in Alexandria. Oh, church in Alexandria just straight up didn't have Hebrews for the longest time, for hundreds of years.
Right.
And so like the official, this is what the church believes. Corporately, every book canonized with a stamp on it was super late.
Well, and even...
But here's
Was it Chalcedon then
Here's
that
my point. Here's my point.
finalized it?
Though, the Gospels never were that.
Yes.
You had
Yes,
outliers like Hebrews. You had
Or
outliers
Jude, or
like
3rd
Jude,
John.
like John, or
Revelation.
specifically Revelation was a
The
stickler.
only reason they kept the book of Joshua because it was part of the Hebrew canon.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because they don't know who authored it.
Well, Joshua did. It says Joshua on the book.
To be fair, Old Testament we don't know who authored a lot. Not the point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's because authorship in the Old Testament is a completely different game. Don't
It
apply
is,
any
yeah.
of our New Testament
It
stuff
is.
to it.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Oh, it's just it's historically the historian has an entirely different task.
Yeah.
But the whole point with even you have all those other epistles that churches were like, isn't it? Should the Shepherd of Hermes count? Should it not? Oh, it's theologically fitting,
Yeah.
but is it?
Should we include the Didache?
Yeah, stuff like that. But the Gospels were almost
Yep.
by the time of like, as far as I'm aware, by the time 300, 400 rolled around, unconnected to the Council of Nicaea, the Gospels were almost universally
Yeah.
accepted across the church
I have
by the Mediterranean.
The only reason I brought that up is because I've heard people unironically say that they're excluding the actual truth.
Specifically, JWs, you'll get that from.
Yeah,
And
conspiracy
many
theorists,
good
just in
conspiracy
general.
theorists.
Yeah.
But religiously, JWs will do that.
A lot of atheists will bring up Constantine all the time.
Yeah.
That he got it organized because he wanted to swap over to the other religion. And he needed them to be organized so that he could have an organized religion for the government.
Yeah, except he played both sides. He played both sides of the two competing religions.
Yeah.
It seems as though he favored Christianity over the other, but he didn't want to split the empire over it. So Mithraism, whatever.
Yeah, no, it's no matter what argument you hear, it does seem like the Gospels are foundational. Like everyone generally agrees, except for the actual heretics, not the people that were labeled heretics, but like the actual heretics.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
The ones where there's like 5 of them
but
that follow the Book of Thomas.
But then you get people today who still want to create more. Like you have the JWs, you have the Mormons who tried to create the whole Joseph
Yeah.
Smith stuff.
Yeah.
Not as necessarily a new gospel, quote unquote, but like additions.
And there were
The Catholics.
well you have some problems. There's some of our some of our Christmas traditions around
The Quran.
the birth of Jesus is from the false gospels. The origin
Please
of
enlighten
sorry,
me
what?
because I
Yeah.
actually disagree with this. As far
I
as
actually
I'm aware.
don't know what you're talking
What?
about. Yeah.
I don't think you're right on this, but carry on because I could be off my rocker.
Justin Martyr
Okay.
Okay.
quotes the Gospel of Thomas
Okay.
in reference to the urgency of Mary having the child at Bethlehem, when in reality they arrived and she had it months later. The
Okay,
gospel doesn't
you-
specify
okay,
that
but-
he had it, that she was like,
So there's
that
flavor
Joseph's
text.
running
Yeah.
through the town, knocking at doors,
Yeah.
trying to get inside.
Oh.
The reference.
Okay.
So that's not
Yeah.
what you're. Oh, I thought you were talking about something else, but that's like
No.
the same thing as what with Jonah, where people think that Jonah went immediately
No.
to.
Yeah.
no,
Like he
so-
was thrown up right at Nineveh's gates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. So whereas Thomas creates this urgency that she was pregnant, that she was 9 months at the gates of Bethlehem, and
Okay.
Jesus was coming out, and so she had to go into the cave. But the
Jesus is coming out. Get into that cave.
right, and like the town is bigoted, and like they're not allowing the pregnant woman in. And like they had to go to the stable, right? But the stable is not presented in the story. It's a manger. Mangers were incorporated in the backs of houses where the animals were kept in Bethlehem at the time.
Yeah.
And so when
Which
it said
are
there was
attached to
no
the
room in
houses.
the inn, it meant there was no room in the part of the house that was the inn. So they stayed in the other part of the house, which is where the animals stepped. They just
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Well, this is huge for
Yeah.
me. I never even thought about
yeah,
this.
and the manger was kept there. So the way the house was organized. How do I? So imagine a rectangle. You've got about
Is this our Christmas episode?
Yeah. So you've got about 4/5 of it is where the people slept.
Yep.
And then the final fifth, there was a few steps down or a ramp or whatever, and there was on one side, and there was a railing on the rest of it.
Yeah.
The manger was placed against the railing, butted up against it, so that the animals who had a doorway at that side of the house could walk in and sleep there at night, because you live in a desert, so you want the warmth of the animals to produce heat inside the house, and you have the manger there for food. And so what they did was, because there was no room in the house section, they slept where the animals would have slept and just put Jesus in the manger.
Oh, that makes a lot more sense, actually.
Yeah.
You're saying
I
it's
can
not
see
a cave with a very
I don't
nicely
know.
placed hole,
And
so
that's
it shines
why-
directly onto
that's
the...
why-
No,
when
no,
the-
that's still there.
I've seen nativity sets. You're wrong.
And that's why 2
Yoda's
years
in them.
later, when the wise men finally come, which
Yeah.
doesn't name 3, but the Gospel of Thomas does.
No, you're right. I thought you were talking
Yeah.
about like, hey, this is the initiation of why we have Christmas on the 25th.
Yeah.
No, that's
I thought you were
different.
talking about like Christmas lights
when
and all that.
when
Yeah.
in the actual Gospels, the Synoptics and John, not John, because
John doesn't care about Jesus as a child.
no, when the other Matthew and Luke record them being in the house when the wise men come, it's because they were in the house the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For 2 years.
They lived in the main... Yeah.
Yeah, and when everybody went back or whatever, they just stayed in the normal house part.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
They were like, welcome to the manger zone.
Wow.
yeah.
Oh my
And so
God.
there's a lot of these like there are some cultural norms around Christmas and in other places in Christianese culture that actually derive because some important people in the past took one of these gospels and thought it was accurate, like Justin Martyr.
Justin Martyr or what's
Origin?
his Origin did a lot of weird stuff.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Ignatius did more stuff with church hierarchy.
Okay.
But yes, he has his own thing. What's his name? It might have been Justin Martyr. Also confused the Epistle of Barnabas with Hebrews.
Oh, I have heard
and
that,
so there's,
yeah.
there's so
Okay.
the early church fathers again. Canon was not.
Yeah.
Canon was the early church. Well, the early church had a lot of books that are in that the main church, let's say mainline church, now has in their canon. Every now and then, local churches would have a couple extras.
Yeah.
It was later on when it was like, no, this is it. This
Yeah.
is the authoritative text. However, some churches still had their, no, we're going to keep the Shepherd of Hermes. We're going to keep a couple others. And then that's how you ended up with your more, let's say, whatchamacallit, different versions of your Coptic Bible, some Catholic stuff, although I think most of that's been edited down.
Or you
now.
have the Syrian text.
Yep.
Yeah,
And so
which is a
the-
common quotation.
You will notice too that southeastern churches in the early church will have more variations in their biblical text because they had more independence.
Because they were not invited to Nicaea.
That's still doesn't have to do with their biblical text, but okay.
Well, no, because like the because of the influence of like whatever, they tended to be excluded from the more
Yeah.
Mediterranean churches.
Yeah. So because they were already disconnected from a more authoritarian church that figured out and limited the canonization, they were already way off on their own.
and not just they were separated from that. It's they were part of they were in the land space of the competing empire.
Yeah.
To the Romans, the ancient.
But even in those places, the Gospels, the four canonical Gospels, are still the four canonical
because
Gospels.
truth will set you free.
Yeah, for sure. We've went super tangential with
Oh, yeah.
the whole authorship and canonization.
Yeah.
We should have a whole episode on that. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Like, bring forth all we got.
We might have to have multiple split
We might have to have an entire episode on the
Old
Council of
and
Nicaea.
New Testament. Well, we can do that.
Where's something that we can like cut out a bunch? What's the topic that we can go to right now? And then gives you the option. Because we've kind of finished our
Yeah, we've done our thing.
what?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're getting the... Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So false gospels. Joel, what are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts on the false gospels?
Yeah.
Honestly,
Which one's true? If you have to pick all of them.
all of them, which ones are true?
The Quran.
You consider the Quran pseudepigrapha?
I mean,
I wouldn't even...
I always
so
consider it a
pseudepigrapha,
false gospel. Yeah.
Pseudo, false.
Yeah.
Graphia, writing. Just false writing. Falsely attributed quotes.
Yeah.
That's all it is, right? That's the difference between the
my
Apocrypha and the pseudepigrapha.
Yeah, my controversial take is that the Quran is one of the things that Paul was warning about in Corinthians when he said, "Do not, even if angels give you a false gospel." I'm being
world.
I'm being hyperbolic.
No, like
but-
you're right. If we're gonna, we can talk
That's a
about
good
that
joke,
at the
though.
time. It's a good joke for sure that this new word from God came exactly like he said it shouldn't, which is bad. Okay. That was actually one of the fascinating things to me when I first got to Bible college was false gospels and apocrypha.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I was just obsessed about it. I'm like, why is Maccabees not in there? What are we missing? Because like, here's the thing: if historical texts are important, why do we have First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles, but not the Maccabean revolt? Right? Because it's all important. And I think that what we're going to do as we come across these gospels is we might introduce outside texts like the false gospels, like the apocrypha, to build the world that Jesus lived in. Right? That's what we're doing now.
Yep. And I think we'll get more into that when we each cover our own biblical
For
text.
sure.
I think.
For sure. Yeah.
Joel, when you're covering messianic prophecies, you're gonna have to deal with the Jewish stuff, particularly in Maccabees. I'll have to deal with the more Dead Sea Scrolls stuff and the connections with the Essenes, which is very much in John.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely outside connections.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to deal with absolutely nothing.
You're gonna have to deal with that monstrosity of an ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck with that.
And then Colton
I
has to
get
figure out whether he wants to talk about Acts.
I'll probably mention it a few times.
Yeah.
But
A doctor wrote this.
That's my favorite thing is that they just expected to be like stethoscope looking doctor that's walking around the ancient world. It's so good.
Is that not how you picture it?
I mean, it kind of is.
so I have a question actually. There was a guy when I was a youth group leader in Ontario. There was a guy who was new to the faith. He's no longer part of the faith. I don't know. You know, in small towns and people who are seeking Christ or seeking something, and they'll come to church for a while or come to a youth group or young adults. I think he was a young adult. He would come, hang out, but there was always this like, yeah, man, I'm like reading the Gospel of Thomas. I want to read anything that's not in the Bible.
Yeah.
Wow. What do you guys think if
I have
you're
friends
in
like
that position? You're not really friends with this guy, or you're acquaintances with this guy, whether it's a coworker, whether a friend of like a light friend, like a very someone who's not
Sure.
you're not super close with, how do you think you handle someone saying, yeah man, these gospels, man, they're something else is here. The God's word, like the truth is embedded in it, man, and they're trying to cover it up. I don't know why I'm talking like someone that's
They're crazy.
needs their fix. But how do you think we should approach this? Because there's the false gospels are only used in two senses. They're either used to somehow say, hey, the real gospels aren't, that reliable.
Yeah.
Which, if that's not a good argument, and you can get into that, which we might have a whole episode on that at some point later on. Or they're there to say, or they're either brought up in that academic way, or they're brought up in this like conspiratorial, like, man,
Yeah.
God's truth.
Well, it brings up the fact that your biggest challenge to faith shouldn't be the Da Vinci Code. Right? Like, you got to realize that.
But if it is,
No,
what
I'm
do you
serious.
do?
Because if you're brought up thinking the Bible is
Like some.
just appeared as it is, with no outside influences. Like, one of the critiques I heard from a guy that I grew up right next to, and he was also reading the Bible, he goes, I never knew who he was talking to. Like, I didn't know who the audience for these books were. So I'd read Paul like it was directly to me, and it's like, I'm not Corinth. I don't have these challenges as like a trade ship city.
I'm not having sex with my stepmother.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. People like that like controversy and conspiracy.
Yeah.
Right? And if it's their willingness to believe whatever comes across their path, that's a stumbling block for them.
I think.
Hang on,
double down on the truth. Really.
Okay.
I think the core to that problem is specifically today why we see so much of this is because there was a big belief. There was a culturally in the West. It was big to follow the leaders, the experts, the institutions at hand, and in America specifically, or in Canada or whatever. There was people had faith in their governments, people had faith in the church, people had faith in the
We're talking
the
80s,
scientists.
90s.
Yeah.
No,
Goodwill.
like
Yeah.
50s, 60s.
Okay.
It was, and then you have a bunch of failures of the government and the churches and the science institutions.
Yeah.
And all come out at the same time, and people lost faith. Was that faith placed in them appropriately? I don't know, but people lost faith in the institutions. People lost faith in experts. And now with the internet, you realize that doctors aren't united on anything. Scientists aren't united on anything. Politicians aren't united on anything. Humanity's not united on anything. And you look at the Bible and you go, oh, it's just the same thing. If you're engulfed in that world. But if you're a Christian like us who studies the Word of God, you have a faith instituted by Scripture, by its unison, presented here, that the Spirit is what holds it together.
Yeah.
And
Well,
the Spirit, like it did throughout the Old Testament, it acts through means in the world, and so it acts through people. And so when you have the book that slowly forms over hundreds of years, yes, it slowly forms over hundreds of years, and yes, there's fractures going on, and that's because God is using broken vessels.
Sure, I think that's definitely a big part of the idea. The idea that we have more faith in our institutions than the average person does in like their political institutions.
I think the point I was trying to make was that it's not our faith in the Bible is not based on man. It's based on the God that the Bible talks about.
Sure. But
well, it's based that. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
My understanding is that we have an inherited faith. Most people, most Christians have an inherited faith that, hey, the Holy Spirit guided His believers, His church, in which texts are inspired by God, which ones are actually authoritative, which ones are from God to them. Well, to that original audience, but for them.
Yeah.
And we believe that God actually not only can do that, but He did do that, and He's still doing that when you open up your Bible and you read His inspired Word, and the Holy Spirit, as He says He would, guide you into all truth. And so that's an inherited faith from Judaism that I think transfers over into Christianity, that we kind of most Christians subconsciously apply that to the Bible. But I think that there's a lot more going on there, especially because it's built in with theology and history, and
Sure.
it's hard.
Yeah, but what you're saying, I was going to say also that while I've experienced people who use the more conspiratorial side of what you're talking about when it comes to the gospel, like, oh, they're hiding them or whatever. But I also see a lot of people they don't have, like what Josh was saying, they just don't have trust that the Bible is what their parents told them it was. So they want to find out what it actually is. And it comes down to the questions of biblical inerrancy, authorship, and authority, biblical authority, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot with liberal theologians, but also just regular Christians now.
You have some people that even go to Bible school, and they're expecting the clearest mathematical foundation.
Yeah. But that's why we're talking about, like, what answer do you give to these people?
Yeah. And I think at least, and this might be just a reflection more of my personality, so it might not be totally fair, be 100% academically honest. You know,
Right.
talk about, hey, these are the themes, this is what this looks like, this builds off of Old Testament stuff. And when they present something that is, insufficient, like most of the fake gospels, you bring up the academic arguments. I think that is just a reflection of my personality, but it's worked with my coworkers.
Yeah.
I think that what you're saying, even when it comes to convincing people that the Bible is true, or I say convincing people, when you're trying to explain why the Bible is the way that it is,
Because it's an aspen.
you can tell it is by the way it is.
Yeah.
But you might not be able to be like, the people might be wanting to hear a more emotional argument that resonates within them, but you should always be prepared with the logical argument.
Yeah.
That's why I think apologetics is important for most people to understand.
Yeah.
And this is a good example of that. Biblical inerrancy, the structure of the Bible, who has the authority to say what is and isn't. These kinds of things are big. And one of the big ones is a lot of it is inherited. We have inherited a lot of the authority idea.
Yeah. A lot of our theological beliefs, most of us haven't done the legwork for, hey, why do I believe the Trinity?
Is the Nicene Creed authoritative?
Yeah. Well, most of us have an inherited belief on Trinity, on biblical inerrancy, on canonization, on actually church authority.
Yeah.
We have inherited beliefs that are built on by previous people.
And questioning those things aren't wrong.
And here's the other thing is if you take the historical argument, before the book was canonized, if we take just loop us back to talking about the good news, right? We talked about how Jesus was talking about the good news, and people were being saved before the good news had been written, and people were being saved, and people were the world was changing. The Roman Empire was being affected. The Eastern empires were being affected. The populations were rising up and changing, and the religions of old in those areas were being converted. Europe became this Christian world, and it spread into the West. A bunch of that was happening before the words were written down. So the ideas were there. So whether or not the book of Matthew was written, like, what do you do about the weirdness of Mark? Well, the words that Mark wrote down, that are written here, were affecting the people before it was written down.
Yeah. This was
and it's historically seen. So not just like, oh, what do we do? It's like, regardless of if the book is here right now, the effect it had is real. And that can't be physically seen, but the effects of it, the historical look at it, how other texts talk about the effect the people, the Christians, had in that early world. Yeah. And the Gospels, the false Gospels, don't have that effect.
Yeah. Well, as those first generation Christians were dying out, these documents were written down.
Yeah.
And that message existed before the penning of these four Gospels. There is something that's been encapsulated by the Spirit of God through divine inspiration in those Gospels with their emphases.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we're going to look at each individual one
Yes.
and try to, hey, what makes us unique? What are some problems with it? Because we should be aware of those problems.
Yep.
Um,
It's been 2,000 years since Jesus was alive. There's going to be some
Well,
difference or variance in how they were penned later on.
Well, there's going to be
shared.
some leveled arguments against it, and so I think it's important. Not only do we know the weaknesses, but we also know what specific perspective is this bringing? What is this emphasizing about? Hey, this is this. So something happened, and it changed the Roman world. Something big happened in backwater Judea with their weird monotheistic god, and then revolutionized modern not modern, well, at that point modern, but society as they knew it. So hey, Jesus changed the world. How did he do it? What is the story? And these 4 stories are, hey, this is how this happened. And so I think that there's something important with, hey, let's go back to the story of how was the world changed.
Yeah, and there's a good quote from director David Lynch. His movies and his shows are really weird and they're wild and people get confused and they're messy and it's weird and they don't make sense sometimes. And the reason he makes stuff like that, though it's still amazingly entertaining and you love watching it, he said it's because life is stranger than fiction.
That's an old saying, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And so it's life is messy. It isn't clean like history presents. Like it's the way humans interact is messy. And so the way the Gospels are going to be organized, the way the Word of God is going to be organized, is going to be through that messiness. And so when you look back, we shouldn't expect to see this like
homogenized, perfect, quote unquote perfect, like sanitized thing.
Yeah.
No, it's not a text. It's not a textbook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
These are guys that have been persecuted.
Yeah.
That are, hey, something amazing has happened. I want to tell you the good news of how
I'm probably
Jesus
going to die tomorrow.
Yeah, this is how Jesus saves the world. Let me tell you the story.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
This will change your life. And then the rest of the epistles are about, hey, this is how this changes your life.
Yeah.
But this is the story that changes the world and you as a person. Well, I'm not expecting a textbook out of that kind of story. I'm expecting him to tell me, hey, tell me the story of how that's so important.
Well, especially when a lot of these people are being hunted down and killed. Yeah. Like, it's not like the government's just saying, hey, let's institutionalize this book, like this letter, let's make 1,000 copies and let's spread it across through all the history.
Like Constantine did apparently at 300. Apparently.
Yeah, it's not a manifesto, it's a movement, right? Like, that's the idea,
Yeah.
Do you have a segment for us there, Colton?
I do. Today's segment is Augustine or Osteen. I can keep saying Osteen because I know you hate it. Olstein. I have to say with the L, right? Right, Josh?
No
There's
L.
no L.
There's an L, but it's silent.
The L is silent. Much
Right.
like he should be. Zing. Okay,
So-
that's good.
No, but then we couldn't play this game.
Oh, yeah, we couldn't play.
You're right. You're right. I have 3 quotes that were either said by Saint Augustine of Hippo, or by I was going to say Saint Austin, but that's not very accurate.
Not of Hippo.
Well,
No,
he might
Joel
be a
Osteen.
second-rate saint.
Joel Austin.
You're right.
I would say third rate.
He's a saint of the third kind. Okay.
But your guys' job, I'm going to say it, and your guys' job is to try to guess who said it. Is it Augustine? Is it Austin? And so
Thank you for saying it properly.
I'm going to say it properly unless you keep saying
Isn't it Augustine? Anyways, we can go on.
I actually think it's Octavian, but
yeah.
someone
Saint
out there is going to get it
yeah.
somewhere.
I call
Anyway.
him Hippo.
Here's the first one. We'll see who gets the most points.
Yeah.
Okay. Fear and faith have something in common.
Augustine.
They both ask us to believe in something we cannot see.
Oh. Never mind.
You know what? I kind of like it. I don't care who it's from. I kind of like the
Augustine.
quote.
Yeah. Fear and faith have something in common.
Ooh,
They
wait,
both
wait,
ask
hold
us to
on.
believe in something we cannot see.
It's very positive.
I know Augustine goes
It's
on to
very
this whole
positive.
thing of like fear and courage are a thing and faith and doubt are a thing, which I think Joel and you guys have heard me talk about. And I know Augustine gets into that in Confessions. but I don't know if
Better
this
not be quoting that
Honestly-
thing that's on every 7-Eleven t-shirt that says courage is not the absence of fear, it is just fear realized and acted.
Well, it's similar.
And
to
it
that.
shows the picture of the truck going up the mountain.
No,
I'm gonna be honest. I haven't read these books. I found them off the internet.
the
so.
whole point is that
be
faith
right.
can only exist when doubt is present.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the whole point.
Yeah.
I know he gets into that in Confessions.
Yeah.
I just don't know if the specific quote is from that section.
I'm going to say Austin.
I think that if I
Very brave.
followed this advice, I could
you.
possibly live my best life now.
Man, the joke is so good, it's got to be said again.
This is a continuous.
It's funny. It's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so you, Caleb, Augustine,
Yeah, I guess.
Josh, Austin,
Austin.
and Joel.
Life keeps getting bester.
Austin.
I'm gonna say it's Austin.
All right. Well, it was indeed Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Caleb.
Yeah, that's
Do
correct.
you think Austin reads Augustin and he's like, oh, I could use that?
I don't know. I think that this is mostly saying nothing. To be honest, it sounds really nice. Fear and faith have something in common. They both ask us to believe in something we cannot see.
That's
what does that
Well,
mean?
it depends on context. If you could see that in Augustine, if his context, because he says some wild stuff.
Sure.
And then in context, you're
Okay,
like,
you have a
oh,
good
okay.
You have a good point. Yeah. I think by itself, it's not really saying much.
It's like Bird Box.
It's words. Welcome to Word Salad
Okay.
with me, Caleb.
Well, since Caleb got that wrong, and I wanted to emphasize that, we're going to go on to number 2.
Nice.
Okay. You are not defined by your past. You're prepared by it. You're stronger, more experienced, and you have greater confidence.
Austin.
That's Austin.
This is too obvious.
Oh wait. See, I was thinking.
I am also might be paraphrasing sometimes, so it's not like... Because if it has like thys in it, obviously it's going to be not Joel Austin.
double cross.
Austin.
You never
gotta carry the
expect a
4.
triple cross.
You
though.
carry the 4.
You never expect a triple
Multiply
cross.
by
Because if
5.
it's a triple cross, then you've gone too far. You're thinking yourself out of something.
Okay, just for
You've not seen Melody, but...
just for the same pattern, I have to say Augustine.
Okay.
It's
Although I think
It's
I'm wrong.
Austin.
It's Austin.
Josh? Yeah, both of you are still Austin?
Yeah, they're right.
It is Austin.
Yeah. We're
Yeah, I thought we'd
You
get
can't
you with
win
that
now.
one.
I know. Well, unless he does the double of nothing.
Unless
Okay. You guys think I might be doubling down? I'm not.
If they're all three Austin, I'm
yeah, but if
so
you say
mad.
you're not doubling down, then you just gave out the answer. But anyways, continue.
What?
Nothing. Continue.
I don't know what that's.
I will beat the game.
Yeah, he's reading my mind now. My mind's empty. I don't think I understand this.
Dude, I'm reading you like a book.
Whoa.
Okay.
Your books are behind you. What are you talking about?
Biting commentary. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But okay, here's the third one. Caleb, this is for all the marbles.
Yeah.
Whoever gets this one right wins.
Augustine.
Playing the odds.
Should we just walk in,
I tried
tell
to
us
be
what it is, and then read the quote?
We're guessing now?
Yeah, we go in blind.
Augustine.
No, just read the
No,
quote.
that's unfair. Then you're reading my mind.
Just
Okay.
read the quote.
Difficulties are set up for God to do something greater. Setbacks are set up for God to move you towards your destiny.
This is Augustine, but I gotta say Augustine.
Wow, Caleb's the triple threat.
If I was right, I'd be 3-0.
I'm
Really?
gonna go Austin again.
It
Do you
has
want to
be
swap up?
Austin.
Are you sure?
No. I'm
Why
not
would I
gonna-
pick something so
Well,
obvious?
no, because I needed to beat you.
Well, then you switch your answer.
Oh,
What are you talking about?
dude, it's the triple play.
August-
I'm
If
the
I
third
lose-
tier.
Augustine is right.
Then my life could be better.
It could be.
And I truly believe I'm living my best life now.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry.
The joke is even funnier the
It's
third
so
time.
stupid. I'm sorry.
Is it Austin?
It is indeed Austin.
You still got 3.
I did. I
You know
did.
why?
The first
Because the
time-
last time you did this game, way back in the day, you did all
That was
three.
forever ago. Yeah, that was
you did
forever
all
ago.
three.
That's-
Same,
that
and
is true.
I was just like,
I think they were all Augustine.
Well, then I'll
Yeah.
change my answer to August, dude.
Yeah.
Woo!
yeah.
Josh takes the win.
Now I'm alone at the top.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone who suffered through the last little bit. Hopefully, you learned a little bit about what's coming down the pipeline. Josh's Mark, Joel's commentary on
Matthew.
Matthew,
Yeah.
Luke.
Colton's covering Luke, and then eventually I'll be talking about John at some point. But what are you going to say there, Josh?
Oh, should we dress up as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John for the audio listeners?
Absolutely.
Colton's gonna wear a stethoscope.
I'll grab myself a lab coat.
There you go.
Do I actually have to boil myself so I have the scars like
Yeah.
John did? Okay, cool.
I think
No,
you
you have
get
to be
offensive for me though.
What, Matt? Oh, I
Jewish
see.
gospel. I don't feel comfortable.
But you're
with all
saying
this.
he's Jewish.
He's also a tax collector.
Oh, that'd be better actually. I come as an accountant.
Hold on.
No, that adds to the
show up in
story.
So much worse.
Show up in a dark green suit,
What?
like all the IRS people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
I'll dress up as the IRS. Okay.
My name's Matt. My name's Levy.
What? Oh.
Because yeah.
Well, yeah. Thanks for making it this far. Yeah. I guess we'll get you when Josh talks about Mark. I'm really looking forward to it.
It can be interesting.
Yeah.
It's gonna be so good. I want to know what you think of the endings.
I love you all.
Caleb, can we get the sign off?
Yeah. Can you just please end it?